Death row isn't just a sentence, it's a grim window into how justice, culture, and power collide in some of the world's most secretive and controversial systems. What really goes on behind those tightly locked doors? Today, we're diving deep into the unsettling realities of death row across the globe, where finality meets an unsettling array of practices. Japan. Japan stands out as one of the most advanced nations that still enforces the death penalty, primarily by hanging. This practice is reserved for heinous crimes such as mass murder, and public support for it remains strikingly high, with over 80% of the population in favour. The judicial process in Japan leaves little room for error, with a conviction rate exceeding 99%. Appeals are exceedingly difficult, particularly when confessions, sometimes obtained under duress, play a central role. On death row, prisoners are held in solitary confinement, with limited privileges and minimal contact with the outside world. Exercise and entertainment are rare, and access to visitors is tightly controlled. The wait for execution is often agonizingly long, averaging 6 years. Some prisoners, such as Iwao Hakamada, have endured decades in confinement. Hakamada spent 46 years on death row before his conviction was overturned, setting a grim record for the longest time spent awaiting execution. Despite these troubling aspects, the death penalty continues to be an integral part of Japan's justice system. Egypt. Egypt's use of the death penalty is alarming not just for its frequency, but for its apparent upward trend. In 2020 alone, the country executed 107 individuals, tripling its tally from the previous year and ranking third globally for the most executions. Mass sentencing is a hallmark of Egypt's approach, with trials often involving hundreds of defendants. Following the 2013 coup, nearly 700 members of the Muslim Brotherhood were sentenced to death. While many sentences were later commuted, others were upheld, with no possibility of appeal. Executions are typically carried out by hanging, though firing squads are used for military personnel. The lack of transparency surrounding these executions is a significant concern. Families are often left in the dark, learning of their loved one's fate only after the sentence has been carried out. Human rights organizations frequently report that confessions are extracted through torture, adding another layer of injustice to an already grim system. Iraq. Post-Saddam Iraq reinstated the death penalty in 2004, and since then, executions have become a grim fixture of the nation's justice system. The majority of death row prisoners in Iraq are convicted on terrorism charges, a category that can be broadly interpreted. Approximately 4,000 individuals currently await execution in Iraqi prisons. Unlike many nations, Iraq provides relatively transparent statistics on its use of the death penalty, which reveals an alarming pattern of mass executions. High-profile cases often involve ISIS operatives or political dissidents, reflecting the government's strategy of using executions as a tool for state control. Criticism of Iraq's capital punishment system is widespread. The swift nature of trials and the vague definition of terrorism have led to the execution of individuals without sufficient evidence of violent acts. In some instances, political figures have found themselves on the gallows, including Saddam Hussein himself, whose televised execution became a global spectacle. While the international community calls for reform, Iraq remains steadfast in its use of capital punishment, a practice deeply entwined with its ongoing struggles against insurgency and political instability. Singapore. Singapore's rigorous approach to law and order has positioned it as one of the strictest enforcers of capital punishment in the world. Over the past 30 years, more than 400 hangings have been carried out in a nation of just 4 million people. Death row in Singapore is particularly unforgiving. Condemned prisoners live in isolation, deprived of basic comforts such as bedding. Weekly visits with family or legal counsel take place under tight security, separated by thick glass walls. In the days leading up to their execution, prisoners are granted small allowances, television, music, and the meal of their choice. However, these gestures do little to soften the reality of their fate. Executions are carried out by long drop hanging, a method designed to ensure a swift and final death. public opinion remains supportive of the death penalty, particularly in cases involving drug offences, which are met with some of the harshest penalties in the world. Criticism of the system, however, is not tolerated. British author Alan Shadrake was imprisoned for less than 6 weeks after criticising Singapore's use of the death penalty in his book. Belarus. In Belarus, the only European country still actively carrying out the death penalty, capital punishment is applied sparingly but with a chilling precision. Prisoners on death row endure conditions that seem almost designed to break the human spirit. They are prohibited from lying or sitting on their beds outside designated sleep hours, and opportunities for outdoor exercise are non-existent. Visits are restricted to monthly meetings with lawyers or family members under strict conditions. The true horror lies in the uncertainty. Prisoners are never informed of their execution date. They wait in limbo until one day they are blindfolded, cuffed, and escorted from their cells to the execution room. There, a single gunshot to the head ends their lives. Families often find out weeks later that the sentence has been carried out, leaving them to grieve with little closure. Reports of coercion and torture in obtaining confessions further cast a shadow over Belarus's judicial system. Despite international condemnation and its exclusion from the European Council, the government shows no signs of abolishing this brutal practice. Public support for capital punishment remains a significant barrier to reform. Vietnam. Vietnam's death row stands as one of the most secretive in the world, averaging over 100 executions annually over the past decade. Much about its capital punishment system remains shrouded in mystery. Since 2011, the country replaced firing squads with lethal injections, but the chemical cocktail used remains undisclosed. Inmates face harsh conditions, with some reports from the UN Committee Against Torture alleging that prisoners are perpetually shackled, held in poorly ventilated cells, and provided insufficient sustenance. Even determining why someone has been sentenced to death can be challenging. Crimes punishable by death range from rape and murder to vague offences like attempting to overthrow the People's Administration. While authorities have hinted at reforms to capital punishment laws, critics argue that crimes are merely being reclassified under new names to allow executions to continue. The exact number of individuals on death row remains a state secret, making it nearly impossible to ascertain the scale of the issue. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's capital punishment practices are rooted in Sharia law, with offences leading to execution including murder, terrorism, waging war on God, and even witchcraft. Public beheadings remain the primary method of execution, though prisoners can request to be shot instead. Migrants, particularly those from Pakistan and Indonesia, make up a significant portion of those executed. 90 non-Saudis were executed in 2019 alone. For those sentenced to death, reprieve is theoretically possible through the payment of blood money to the victim's family. However, this is often unattainable for migrant workers with no ties to the country, while the government claims juveniles are no longer subject to execution. Reports suggest otherwise. One such case is that of Mohammed Al-Faraj, arrested at 15 and still awaiting execution. The government faces mounting international criticism for its practices, yet Saudi Arabia's justice system shows little sign of reform. Iran. Iran holds the dubious distinction of executing the most people per capita. Officially, the government acknowledges triple-digit executions annually, but human rights groups estimate the real numbers may reach 1,000. Hanging is the primary method, often carried out in a disturbingly crude manner. Prisoners are hoisted by cranes, resulting in a slow and agonizing death by strangulation. Stoning, though officially discontinued, has reportedly been used as recently as 2012. One of Iran's most controversial policies is the execution of individuals for crimes committed as minors. Despite pledges to reform, Amnesty International estimates that around 90 such prisoners currently languish on death row. Additionally, murder victims' families have the power to either demand execution or pardon the accused, adding an unpredictable element to the system. Public support for the death penalty is gradually waning, but the Iranian regime continues to use it as a tool for maintaining control. China. China leads the world in executions, carrying out more than the rest of the globe combined, while official numbers remain opaque. Estimates suggest thousands are executed annually. Over 40 crimes carry the death penalty, including corruption, drug trafficking, and the vaguely defined undermining morale. The judicial system is heavily tilted toward the prosecution, with a conviction rate exceeding 99%. China's efficiency in carrying out executions is both striking and disturbing. Mobile execution vans, equipped to administer lethal injections on the move, exemplify the country's swift approach. Though societal support for capital punishment remains above 80%, international critics decry the lack of transparency in the process. The country has made moves to reduce executions, but the scope of the practice remains unparalleled. USA. The United States stands out for its transparency in reporting death row statistics, with around 2,500 inmates currently awaiting execution. The country primarily uses lethal injection. Though methods like electrocution and firing squads are still legal in some states, the average wait time between sentencing and execution is 12 years, during which inmates are isolated but allowed visitation and legal counsel. American death row practices include notable quirks, such as granting prisoners a final meal of their choice. However, the process is far from flawless. Reports of botched executions, including those involving faulty lethal injection protocols, are not uncommon. In Arkansas in 2011, a rush to use soon-to-expire lethal drugs led to 7 executions within 11 days, raising ethical questions about the state's practices. While the United States death penalty system may appear more regulated than those of other countries on this video, it remains a contentious issue. Critics highlight racial disparities in sentencing, wrongful convictions, and the overall morality of capital punishment in a developed nation. Despite decreasing public support, the practice persists in many states, ensuring the debate over its place in modern society continues. What are your thoughts on capital punishment? Should it still exist? Or is it time for change? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this video thought-provoking, don't forget to like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into topics like this.